All right, we're going to call to order the June 16th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council and Redevelopment Agency. We'd like to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. We'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight will be led by Ms. Kathy Potnick. The council did confer with our labor negotiator regarding unrepresented employees, the department heads group, and the city manager, and no action was taken. Direction only was given. Brings us to item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the city council. And although we're not permitted under state law from having a discussion or taking action on any items brought up under item 1A, it is an important opportunity for a public forum. We do ask that anyone wishing to address the council on this or any other item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available at the front door and turn it into the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use to make sure that everyone gets the opportunity to be heard. And to that end, we ask that all comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. On the regular agenda items after item 1A, we take the request cards up until the conclusion of the staff report. Once the public testimony and the council questions and discussion have begun, no additional cards will be taken. So if you have an intention to speak on an item that's later on the agenda, the sooner the better for the card, but certainly by the conclusion of the staff report. We also recognize that for 1 or 2 people left in town, there's some anxiety to speaking in public and on television. And so we do ask that there not be any demonstrations, no boos, no applause, no catcalls, and that we maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. So with that, we have a couple of requests to speak under item 1A, and the first is by Lana Paul-Hamus, representing the West Sacramento Historical Society. And if Mr. Gates and Shepler would come up with Lana.
Good evening, City Council. I'm Lana Paul-Hamus, part of the West Sacramento Historical Society, and these are a couple of my neighbors, Nicholas Gates and C.J. Shepler. And we're here tonight to discuss a tree that is looking forward to being maybe eliminated from our West Sacramento scene. The West Sacramento is a city of trees. We have many named after trees. The valley, let's see, we have a street named Valley Oak Lane, Sycamore, Poplar, Holly, Willow, Hemlock, Evergreen, Maple, just to name a few. We also have street names after nuts. We have a Pecan Street, we have a Walnut Street, we have Acorn Court. Now is the time to acknowledge the importance of trees in West Sacramento and declare the 155-year-old English walnut butternut tree the first landmark tree in West Sacramento. In this way, we would honor trees and their importance and significance to the history of West Sacramento. And my 2 friends would like to also contribute their thoughts. Okay, Nick?
Your planners must know a way to work a way around this great gift to West Sacramento. Our future generations will be thankful that we saved it.
All right, thank you, Mr.
They're
Gates.
both 6th graders from Southport Elementary School.
All right. Mr. Shepler.
This tree belongs to West Sacramento. One of nature's greatest gifts, beautiful trees. Why would anyone destroy this tree?
So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks for being here this evening. I'm gonna call out of order because I think it's the same topic. Jerry Hughes Wingfield on behalf of the West Sacramento Conservancy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can I be heard? West Sacramento Conservancy requests a landmark designation for the only hybrid English walnut butternut tree on Tower Street in West Sacramento. The trunk at breast height is 22 feet, 4 inches, 80 inches DBH, the official way of saying it. It's in good health. due to its location and excellent soil. It provides habitat for many creatures and is especially stately. I brought a picture to show you. My husband is in front of this tree, and he looks like an ant.
Jerry, if you put it on that table there,
Oh, maybe we
there's an overhead camera that can pick it up so that folks at home can see it as well.
Okay. Oh, down.
There. Is that Bill?
That is Bill.
No.
He's holding his measuring device. Oh, good, thank you. The history of this non-native tree has been established by the deeds, old deeds and maps that we discovered over at the Yolo County Archives. And here, this is one of the old maps, 1900, that shows exactly where the C.W. Reed Nursery was. It was established in 1855 south of Washington. This type of tree was familiar to immigrants from the East Coast and would have been desirable to the recently arrived Californians. Records show that Reed was sensitive to the needs of his customers. Shipley Walters, West Sacramento, Roots of a New City. This is a wonderful book. I'll put that on. She describes that he had 300,000 fruit and ornamental trees and plants, evergreens, shrubs, roses, etc., comprising a general assortment of nursery articles for sale at low prices, even though seasonal flooding was common. I have copies of the old maps and deeds to share with you, and I can make copies for everyone if you'd like to have them. Anyway, it's an important old tree. We don't have one landmark tree in West Sacramento. I mean, we don't have one named, designated. So we're asking you to please make that dedication for this particular tree. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Martin Flatley, from the West Sacramento Police Officers Association.
Good evening, Mayor Cabalden, members of the City Council. Appreciate this opportunity to speak to you tonight. The reason I'm here is this coming Saturday, the 19th, here in this building, we're going to have the James McKnight Memorial Ball. James McKnight was a police officer that was killed in the line of duty while working for the West Sacramento Police Department 20 years ago this month. The reason I'm here is I'm here to invite all of you gentlemen, as well as Toby Ross, Carol Richardson, anybody in the audience that wants to come. It's going to be a full-on deal. We're going to have color guards. We're going to have bagpipes. We're going to have a full-on dinner. We're going to have a full bar. We're going to have music afterwards. It should be a great evening. It's a dress-up affair. And we'd really love to see you gentlemen. Any of you can make it. I know you all have busy schedules. Mr. Ross and Carol, it'd be great to see you guys there too. We'd really enjoy it. And appreciate this time. And I'm going to leave the flyer over here if that's okay with you gentlemen. And it'd be great to see any of you here. Okay?
Great.
Thank you.
All right, for folks in the public, is there a website or anything, any place that someone could go to find out more or how to get a ticket?
The tickets you can get at through the West Sacramento Police Department. You can call Detective Tate at 617-4958 and Deborah Lugo, 617-4933. Got the tickets there, and I'll be working at the PD tomorrow and Friday. Come right in the building. I'll be in the front. I help out the chief, and so we'll be glad to give you tickets, and we'd certainly be happy to see anybody that would like to attend. Like I said, he was killed in the line of duty here 20 years ago. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Flatley. And Bill Lowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. William Lowell of West Sacramento for the record. Yeah, I'm a little concerned about the trees too, because over there on the, let's see, northeast corner of Park and West Acre, the 3 big trees were just taken out here this last week, and that rather surprised me, because those trees have been there for over 25 years, and they've been cutting them back. I think they were fruitless mulberries. They were cutting them back like every other year or something like that, but now and then the city was having to come back and trim them a bit to prevent them from covering up the stop signs. But over in Sacramento, whenever they get ready to take a tree down, they hold public hearings, and they posted on each tree notice of public hearing and such a date. And I think after they get so many, or after a certain period of time, then they have that public hearing on whatever trees that are considered for removal. And I've reported some trees on that side of the river even that appeared to be dangerous. They appeared to be rotting out at the bottom or something like that, and then later on they would be removed, but not until after the public hearing. So I thought we might consider something like that, because I thought this taking out of those 3 trees was kind of reckless, because those 2 duplex units are going to be a lot hotter this summer, and I was also I also welcome those 2 new bus shelters there on West Capitol Avenue, this side of Jefferson Boulevard, but I was a little puzzled by the signage that says Jefferson Boulevard, and I think it should read West Capitol Avenue at Jefferson Boulevard, because they face West Capitol Avenue. So anyway, I'll let you mull that one over. And this article in the B from yesterday, it says public input sought on new bridge. So they're talking about another bridge across the Sacramento River, and again, I think we should have one between Southport and South Sacramento, but they only give you this computer address, but I guess I could call this fellow at the phone that printed it, or I can call somebody at the city, but yeah, I think we should have another bridge, but further south than the Pioneer Bridge. And again, that would increase connectivity. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lowell. And that survey is online, and it's still open for folks that, on both sides of the river, that are interested in providing their feedback and input on potential we don't call them bridges, but potential river crossings between the Sacramento and West Sacramento sides of the river. So we'd encourage folks that is there a link on our website as well, or? Okay, if you go to the City of West Sacramento website to the transportation page, there's a link to the survey, which is still open. All right, Mr. Ross, I know we've been corresponding about this tree, and so perhaps you could give us a status report or give us some sense of what's happening with the issue.
I believe we've just received a formal request for landmark status. There was a verbal request earlier, and I've communicated with some of the representatives in the past week, and they've just sent something in. There is actually a tree removal permit that's already been issued in April, but there's no immediate danger that tree permit is going to be used. This is a city project, so we can control that. There are a number of reasons why it was selected for removal, and probably the appropriate way to deal with this is to have that aired in some fashion. The normal process for landmark status is that it would come back to the council with the full range of consideration. It obviously wouldn't make sense to designate a landmark status and then recommend its removal. It's estimated that the cost of not removing this tree to the infrastructure project would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000. And so it's a substantial issue. Perhaps more difficult would be that it could potentially delay the Bridge District infrastructure, affecting our ability to meet our obligations for the Prop 1C funding. So there are substantial reasons, and the normal process for tree removal was followed, and we will be mitigating for a number of trees that will be removed in the Bridge District. This is one of them. There have been assertions that the tree is in great condition. The arborist study initially found it to be in fair with some structural problems, so it's not necessarily in great condition. In fact, when you look at it, you can see that it's not been a tree that's been well maintained. But we have gone out to the arborist and asked for more detailed analysis of this, and we'll have that in the near term.
And this is an independent arborist, or the city's?
It's an independent arborist. It's not the city's tree manager. It's an independent arborist.
Okay. All right. That brings us to item 1B then, which is council communications. Are there reports or other communications this evening? Mr. Kristoff.
Not a lengthy one, very briefly, but at the West Sacramento Flood Protection JPA met, and I think the meeting was June 10th. And really the only thing of significance was the approval of a professional services contract with KSN for right-of-way engineering. And it's the tune of about $40,000. Really not very substantial, but it was the only action that was taken there. And then, of course, we received all of the updates on the various projects, and I think I sent one of those in our packet to each one of the council members. And if anybody has any questions, it's no problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kristoff. Mayor Pro Tem Villegas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Yolo County Transportation District met Monday evening, and a couple things I wanted to share with the council. A few weeks, last month, I guess it was, the district asked the district director to go back and consult with the technical advisory committee relative to prioritizing the Tiger II funds that are now available, although not nearly as much as what was available initially under the Tiger I grant funds. So as a result of that work, the priorities created a little bit of a stir in that, I think, Mr. Mayor, you're probably well aware, the I-5-113 interchange, which has always been a heavy lift and a very expensive $140 million project, I think it is. Maybe not quite that much, but quite a bit. Surfaces regularly, but never finds itself in a position favorably to be supported because it's a difficult project. It doesn't ever fit nicely within the categories where funds become available. Long story short, it again found itself in a difficult position. Staff did not recommend, did not support that project going forward as a priority for the transportation district. So consequently, there was a lot of dialogue back and forth. What did ultimately surface was, and because the way the funds are available under the Tiger II, there's only $600 million as opposed to $1.5 billion in Tiger I. The categories now break down with $25 million in administration, $35 million for transportation planning, $140 million for rural projects, and then $400 million for at-large. And so after a lot of discussion, part of which included Helen Thompson's input, because she sits on the SACOG board, and she's also a delegate to the Strategic Planning Committee, which ultimately will have some say in the region's priorities. The recommendation to move forward was the Road 31, the Urban Rural Connector project under the rural set-aside funds, and then the rail relocation project as part of the $35 million set aside for transportation planning. So those two surfaced as the two priorities for the district, and we'll move forward, although probably not likely to get a lot of support from SACOG because I think they've already identified the priorities for the region, which are US 50 watt interchange and the intermodal station. So maybe a lot to do for nothing, I'm not sure, but you've probably been privy to most of this, but that's what resulted as a result of that 2-hour meeting. So then, let's see, the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District met on the 9th. We'll have a new district engineer. Stan Dean was appointed by the board to take over for Mary Snyder. She'll be retiring in a month. And then we had another spirited conversation relative to the Prop 218 hearing. And I think as council will recall, initially staff in the fall early spring, brought proposal forward with a 75% increase for our treatment fees. That was staff's recommendation to help bridge the gap in the budget. Conversation occurred, that fee was then reduced to 50%, that was the motion. And then on Wednesday, a lot of conversation again about the budget and some of the difficulties with balancing it. But at the end of the day, several motions were moved, and we ended up with a 25% increase proposed, which would be theoretically finally approved in July, which would go into effect, I think, in August. I think that's right. It says, I think August is when it would actually kick in, generate about $3.5 million a year.
Well, that's not 25%, that's 25 cents.
25 cents, I'm sorry, 25 cents, sorry,
Okay.
Bill. Yeah, no, you've been keeping an eye on that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
well,
thank you.
well, let me tell you, well, actually, interesting lead-in. It could end up being 25% if we don't get a handle on the district's budget.
Mm-hmm.
One of the issues that I've raised a couple times, and I think it's been echoed by others now recently, although not formally, because we've not had the formal agenda item, but I just wanted to share with the council. One of the things that I think we talked about nearly 10 years ago when we were contemplating joining the district was the ability to manage the district and properly manage the district in terms of how we would be able to make sure that our rates are kept low here in West Sacramento, although only one of the member agencies. One of the things that continues to surface is that the biggest part of our budget are the staff costs. Those staff costs are not part of what the district has any control over necessarily. The employees are Sac County employees. So that whole conversation has sort of evolved over the last few budget workshops. So just want to share with the council that that's a conversation that needs to occur. I don't know when or how quickly, but I think it needs to happen. And so I'll be working with staff to bring some proposals forward for consideration as we look at how we more properly manage the district's budget as it pertains to staff costs. Because right now, although it's the bulk of our budget, we don't really have a lot of say in that. So, so I just want to share that with the council.
Well, more power to you. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, in all the multi-jurisdictional agencies that we're in, I think each of us have been making the point that there needs to be some parity between how we're dealing with budgets and employee costs and COLAs and those sorts of issues at those multi-jurisdictional agencies in the same way that there is at the jurisdictions that make up those agencies, even if their finances aren't directly tied to ours in the same way. So whether it's at YOLO Bus or at SACOG or at the Air District or at other places, I think we've all been trying to make that case. You don't have the direct authority at the Regional Sanitation District. Maybe this will be the moment that will cause that statute to be reopened, but it is an important issue that we shouldn't be contributing to participate in these other multi-jurisdictional agencies that then are able to poach our best staff or undermine our ability to manage our own human resources effectively. So, all right, just to follow on, the SACOG board meets tomorrow, and Mayor Pro Tem Villegas is correct. The Transportation Committee that I chair has recommended 2 projects for the overall for the big chunk of the Tiger 2 money, being the Sacramento Intermodal Phase 2, which is essentially the improvements around the train station, and the Watt Avenue Highway 50 interchange, with the authority being delegated to what is the equivalent of our executive committee, which is Supervisor Thompson sits on, but so do I, to add additional projects once the cities and counties have actually made their initial proposals to the department. So we did that in order to make sure that we would have the opportunity, if we or anyone else had additional proposals, to bring forward that were that we thought would be competitive nationally, and very few projects would be. And we're not in a great position all by ourselves, given that we got a Tiger grant in the first round already, and then there's a lot less money now, but we wanted to keep that door open. But those two projects, Sacramento Intermodal and Watt Avenue, are not competing in these other categories. The planning money that would be available for the rail relocation project that we're working on with the county and Woodland is a set aside inside of Tiger, and that's not money that we're competing against Watt Highway 50 or the intermodal. So, so the work that you were doing at the board at the Yellow Bus board is relevant, because we're going to have to set some priorities for those dollars as well, separate from the two gigantic projects. So that will be, the board's going to be hearing this tomorrow, but the recommendation is that they delegate that authority to the committee to be able to do that. I'm encouraged that your board, or my board that I wasn't at, took that action on I-5-113, because there's no chance that project is not competitive even locally, much less on a national basis, and we would have been taking other projects that do have a possibility off the table in order to advance that. So I'm sure it was a tough meeting, but it's an important outcome to occur. Second, I was at the annual meeting of the U.S. Conference of Mayors over the weekend in the beautiful city of Oklahoma City.
It rained on.
Huh? Thunderstorm on the last day, but otherwise 95 degrees, but it doesn't matter. You don't really want to go outside much. We focused a lot on issues related to the Gulf Coast and to the federal budget with respect to the community development block grants, the energy and environment block grants, and other issues with the feds. But this is also the meeting where we take up policy issues, and I'm just passing out to the council the 3 resolutions at the conference that I sponsored that were passed. One on extended producer responsibility for products in terms of toxics and recycling. We adopted a policy here at the council a year and a half ago on extended producer responsibility, and so we're working with principally with the mayor of Seattle, but with some others as well on trying to extend that on a national basis. Second, as I think the council knows, I lead the Conference of Mayors Education Committee, and so we adopted a set of priorities for congressional reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act to improve student achievement in urban schools like ours. But the most important one is the one I handed out, Resolution 56, which is on aligning federal policy on floodplain management, climate change to sustainable communities. And this is an effort to put the mayors of the nation on record collectively, all 1,000 of us, in support of the notion that the federal policy on floodplain management from FEMA needs to match up with what the feds are saying about climate change and about sustainability. And for both sustainability, environmental sustainability and climate change, encouraging economic development and population growth to be directed to places like here, as opposed to in the foothills or other environmentally sensitive areas and farmland, is the only effective climate change policy, and it's the most effective of the sustainability policies. But FEMA, in particular, and the White House executive order draft sort of ignore all of that and just say no floodplain development no matter what. And so what we're trying to do, and the Mayor of Dallas and I have been leading this effort nationally, is to try to get the White House's attention and Congress's attention about this big mismatch between these two policies. And so this was a big victory to get the Conference of Mayors to do this. We got opposition from a couple of national flood management organizations and even a couple of environmental groups who I think just don't yet get it. Most environmental groups have been fine with this approach, but despite the opposition, we were able to shepherd this through unanimously. And so now we'll bring the conference to the table, both on that issue, and then secondarily, nationally, but very important to us locally, it puts all the cities of the country on record in support of our specific proposal on AR and A99 flood zones, to try to make it more feasible, to give us and cities like us a path to floodplain zones that will not shut down economic development and have gigantic insurance costs for our residents and all the negatives that we've been trying to avoid. So in our discussions with FEMA, it's no longer just the West Sacramento proposal. It is now being backed in a substantive way by the mayors across the country. So this was actually a big initiative. I'm very happy that the rest of the mayors were supportive of it. And then there's a special meeting that I'm not attending, but I'll brief the council at a later date on the national municipal response on the Gulf disaster, which honestly I've been less involved in, since we're a bit away from the Gulf Coast, but we're trying to create a more effective response that deals with the issues of the cities that are along the coast. And they've been very helpful on this floodplain stuff, so I want to make sure that I'm there to help them on the oil spill as well. All right, item 1C is appointments to boards and commissions. We don't have any of those this evening. Item 2 is being continued to a future meeting. Mr. Brooks is unable to be with us this evening, so that brings us to the consent agenda, items 3 through 17. Any items on consent any member wishes to pull, or any separate questions or comments?
Comment on board.
6 and 13. Nothing, Mr. Beers? Okay. So for the staff that I know are, like, some of them are waiting to get out of here as soon as possible. The ones that we have are 4, 5, 6, 11, 13, and 15 for either.
Skip 4, I'm good. I'm good with that.
Okay. All right, item 5 is consideration of revised guidelines for the use of sewer credits for restaurant attraction and retention. And I have this one. So, first question, Mr. Lucan, we don't have the program guidelines make reference to these targeted areas and make reference to Figure 2, Figure 4, Figure 5, Figure 7, which I didn't see in the document anywhere. So we're saying that these are the priority areas within the city, and they have designated names, but it's not clear what geographies those names specifically refer to. So, for example, the Washington neighborhood can mean lots of different things depending on how big or small we're looking at. So, do you have a?
I don't have those here this evening, but those are figures that are within the restaurant study.
Okay. Okay. So the document says this policy specifically excludes quick service or fast food restaurants, and then defines quick service restaurants. The staff report says that limitation applies only to drive-throughs,
Yes.
but I don't see that qualifier in the actual program guidelines. Is that here somewhere?
I'll let Diane Richards answer that question.
In the definitions in the guidelines, quick service restaurants are defined as fast food restaurants with drive-up or drive-through service in the definitions in the front of the guidelines.
Yeah, but that's what I'm looking at. It says quick service restaurants, as defined by the strategy, are fast food chains primarily in the hamburger, donut, coffee, sandwich, Mexican, pizza, Chinese, barbecue, and deli segment, period.
Oh, I see there is a discrepancy there. I'm sorry, that is an error. That's an old definition. It should read as it does in the final draft document, which is not the red line. It is correct there, I apologize. Quick service restaurants, as defined in the zoning ordinance, are fast food restaurants with drive-up or drive-through service. That is the new definition. The definition in the red line did not pass muster in terms of being a definition that the public could understand and was not legally sufficient. So we revised it.
So the revision deals with more than just the drive-through?
No, the final document is correct. The red line is incorrect.
Okay.
The attachment 3, which is the final draft,
I
the
see.
definition is correct there, and it should have been the same in the red line.
So tell me, why, I mean, I absolutely support not using a very limited public resource to subsidize drive-through fast food, but the study and the survey of the public indicated there's a deep vacuum of non-fast food restaurants in our city, and that there was really no concern raised in the public surveys or anyone else that we didn't have enough fast food.
Right.
But this would allow this would allow, without, any council authorization specifically, the use of one of these credits for a non-drive-through fast food operation, chain fast food operation.
Yes.
And if we only have, whatever the number of credits, was it 20 or, some relatively small number, it's not, that's a lot of restaurants, but, if we only have a small number of them in total, why would we want to allow them to be used to build another, but maybe not drive-through, another McDonald's, and then if a restaurant that we really wanted in the community comes forward and we're out of them, why is that good public policy if that's not a need that was identified in any of the survey or study work?
Let's see, actually, the residents survey, they did actually indicate they did not want more fast food restaurants. And the only way that we could adequately distinguish them was by the use of drive-up and drive-through service. Generally speaking, the majority of fast food restaurants have a drive-through. That is, they make a significant amount of their sales from the drive-up.
I know that there's at least a dozen cities in the country that have adopted formula-based retail ordinances that attempt to get at exactly this issue of chain fast food. And did we look at those ordinances and the definitional approaches that they took?
We did not. We looked at other areas in California and looked at other cities with sewer credits. We did not, the consultants cautioned us on excluding fast casual and some of the other restaurant types because we do need them. We need to have more variety, and we need to, they were actually encouraging us to not even do this because we have such a limited supply and we just don't have variety. But yet we have a proliferation of fast food chains with drive-thrus.
Right, but variety is a different question, right? So, for example, the city of Benicia, which is in California, has adopted a formula-based retail ordinance that doesn't deal with sewer credits, so it might not have caught into your mix. But that ordinance says, of a chain of any of these kind of fast food types, there can only be one in the central business district. Period. It's a zoning issue, not a credit issue. And I'm not proposing that. That's a much more aggressive policy. But what I do want to know is why we would want to use a limited public subsidy to bring even a non-drive-through chain fast food restaurant that we may already have. We have a Subway, for example, that's not a drive-through. And to use one of our 20 sewer credits or whatever the number is for another non-drive-through Subway, and then not have one available if Applebee's or heaven forbid an actual local, some local restaurateur wants to open up something, it seems to me a really bad policy choice. So that's what I'm trying to get at. It's not that I want to discourage that Subway from coming. It's just I don't want to use a public subsidy that is limited, that we need to be able to help make the numbers work for a local small business trying to start a restaurant. I don't want to use that subsidy for some national chain that doesn't need it and lose the opportunity.
And we tried several times to define fast food restaurants in a way, including a definition that Sacramento used where it alluded to corporate chains or more than one that proliferate, and it was problematic in terms of being able to distinguish those and or to be discriminatory. And we can go back and take another look at it. Is it your desire to exclude all fast food regardless of whether it has a drive-through or not?
Well, again, I'm not trying to exclude them. What I don't want to do is spend limited public resources to subsidize them. It's a very different matter. We need more food of all kinds. Right?
I meant
so if somebody wants to build a Subway in my neighborhood on 15th Street, I would welcome it. That's not the point. It's that we really need to be growing some indigenous, organic. I don't mean organic food, but local eateries in the city that make West Sacramento. That help to build our sense of place and character, like the Pheasant Club and Vince's and Vientiane and the other places, Emma's and Sal's and other places that were referenced in the survey, those that are West Sac. And there are some chains that were clear in the survey we want too. I'm not suggesting it's only for local restaurateurs. The folks who filled out their survey said we really want an Applebee's, right? So but I don't want to run out of sewer credits for those that are, where there's a deep desire for them in the community and a deep need, and having blown them on chain fast food. And it just seems to me, given the number of other jurisdictions that have adopted ordinances that deal with this issue, maybe not in the sewer domain, but in the land use domain, that there has to be a definition that's not legally problematic, that could be used.
Staff will go back and research that and come back.
Okay. All right. Mr. Johansson, is that okay?
No, I concur. I think you're pretty much on point. I think we all want, I mean, we're going to have some real issues once the area over here across from West Capitol Avenue starts opening up. Because, I mean, I have seen the potential for, we'll say Applebee's, or the potential for a Subway. And I would like to make sure, like you say, that we have the credit for the Applebee's as an inducement. I look at it as they put tablecloths down and have cloth napkins. That's my definition. But,
well, along that line, though, isn't it what we're talking about is a full-service establishment with waitresses, the whole,
right,
as opposed to simply a fast food?
It ends up being those who know about the sewer credits come in and ask for them, and part of addressing this policy and changing it will be that we will market the credits to those restaurants that we desire. Right now, we do, we expect to be approached by both types, as a matter of fact, fast food with and without. So it is a timely topic. We will research the other formulaic methods that have been used, and we will return.
Mr. Johansson?
Diane, do we have an idea how these fees allow different types of restaurants to be competitive? For example, Peregrines, I imagine it's a corporate franchise, it's a corporation. But how does this level of subsidy assist something like that versus, a Jack in the Box or something like that? In other words, does this mean a whole lot to what we're expecting to get here in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yes, it can be a significant upfront cost to any restaurateur. The larger the restaurant, the more fixtures, the higher the sewer charge will be. And so the higher the credit would be, and the larger the reduction would be to the client building the restaurant. So it would reduce their startup costs, their upfront costs to open the restaurant.
So just for me, there's sort of the two issues. There's the fast versus the table service, which we distinguished, and then there's the chain versus the local, right? So, for example, the Eagle Cafe was one that got one of these credits, and to me it fills a niche, and it may not have been able to open without that. So I don't want to suggest that if you don't have, in all cases, if you don't have a waiter or a waitress, then it's not. But that should be, if we're setting priorities, that's one of this formula chain consideration, which has been, we brought up, a lot of times in other development projects, should at least be a factor. And whether it's not necessarily excluding, but we're already creating priorities based on geographies, and maybe we ought to look at that based on those two factors as well. So, okay. So is there any objection to continuing this item? It's not. We don't need to adopt this evening, correct? For some time-sensitive reason, or?
No, it's just that I have requests pending, and I've been sort of holding them off to try to figure out where we're going. Thank you.
What request?
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Okay.
We'll solve a lot of problems, maybe.
Right. Okay. Item 6 is consideration of budget adjustments for the Downtown Farmers Market project. And we have a public request and Mr. Johansson.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, I think this is, it's going to be a good project. We need to do things on West Capitol Avenue. We'll have the Civic Center developed at that time, maybe the streetscape developed or finished by then. But one of the things I wanted to emphasize is the benefits of having this type of event along West Capitol Avenue. It's not only going to create a sense of space, on West Capitol Avenue, but it will have all the benefits of kind of the health initiatives that the council has been pursuing, the availability of healthy foods, getting out and supporting local farmers and that type of thing. And I'd just like to, I know I agree we should go down this path and pursue this, but I also want to emphasize that we do have an urban farm stand in the Bright neighborhood that has been fairly successful over the last 2 months. And I understand that they are going to open a few more of these in West Sacramento. So as a precursor to selling fresh food, fresh fruits and vegetables at the farmer's market, I think it would benefit the city to promote the urban farm stands, to let people know about those so they become programmed to buy their produce at these things. Because what's happening at the urban farm stand, the first day it's a novelty, but then people get in the swing that that's where they're going to buy their vegetables. So when they go to Raley's or whatever, they don't buy it there and they go to these places, and that helps support this. So I think we've got a year or so, maybe less, before this comes online to really get the word out that there are healthy alternatives already, so people get in the mindset. So when this does hit, it's kind of like a little pre-advertising for this. Just a suggestion, but I think it's a worthwhile endeavor.
And Denise Seals, on behalf of the West Sacramento Chamber of Commerce, just been our partner on this project through Project Pride and through our own strategic plan. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. So it's really exciting to be here talking about a downtown farmers market, the second and final phase of the market and festival. You know, I won't bore you with an explanation of Project Pride. I know you know what Project Pride is all about. The committee has taken this first phase as far as they can, and they're anxious to finish. And you know, we know that farmers markets and festivals are proven economic development tools. And when you work as long and hard on a project as this group has, it's always really gratifying to meet your objectives. And as such, the Farmers Market Committee goals have been to provide affordable produce with a Yolo County focus, directly from farmers, make it accessible to all of our residents, to include acceptance of WIC, FMPP, and EBT low-income nutritional coupons. We want to have a variety, abundant produce, but also meat, fish, dairy, eggs, honey, maybe some local beverage. Entertainment, local arts and crafts, product demonstrations, educational and cultural opportunities located in the city core, on major public transportation corridors, and a weekly downtown event that will continue to create opportunities for residents, major employee groups, and businesses of West Sacramento to come together as a community in a festival-style farmers market atmosphere. You know, we all know that the downtown farmers market will be a major contributor to the revitalization of the downtown core, but something else to think about is it's a wonderful opportunity for us to continue and really further conversations that Councilmember Johannesson, prior to his joining your council, did just yeoman's work with thanks from the chamber, with local property owners and business owners about the prospects of a PBID or even a downtown merchants association in this area. So what better mechanism to demonstrate the optimistic potential of our city core than a place that drives residents to it once a week. So as you can tell, we're excited, and trust me, the downtown merchants are thrilled. What a great opportunity to partner with the nationally recognized award-winning Davis Farmers Market to develop a downtown farmers market that's uniquely West Sacramento. And as a resident, really how wonderful for our community. This project meets Goal 3 of the Council's strategic goal to develop West Capitol Avenue in our downtown, as well as a 2010 Council Management Agenda high priority for community events and festivals in the downtown area. It supports the restaurant strategy for downtown core, and it provides a well-timed, much-needed spark. And I wish Mr. Christoph were here to hear this, because this is going to be heartwarming for him. This final phase will complete the logistics, training, and the first year of operation, set for May 2011, on time, on target, and on budget. So thank you so much for your vision and your commitment to this project. Councilmember Christoph, you just missed my great summation. It mentioned being on time, on target, and on budget. So thank you all.
And in 3 minutes.
All right. Anything else on this item? Oh, were you turning your microphone on? Oh, off. All right. This isn't, I mean, I didn't pull this off either, but this is a really exciting project for all the reasons that Ms. Seals mentioned, and we're definitely committed to it. It is, many of us were at the Urban Farm Stand opening and have been since, and it's also an exciting part of the evolution of the community, and Mr. Johanneson's right in terms of providing additional opportunities for fresh foods and produce to get into neighborhoods throughout the city. What I think is the great thing about the farmers market, this kind of approach is there is no middle buyer at all, right? And so for the urban farm stand model to work, Alchemist and others have to go out and purchase the foods from farmers in the region, and then they're essentially reselling them. And they're nonprofits, so they don't have to make much, but they have to cover their own organizational expenses. And the certified farmers market provides a real opportunity for residents in our city to be able to touch the farm, well, hopefully not to, but look at the farmer in the eye that's producing the food. And the connections, I think, one of the great benefits of living in a community like ours is being part of a rural county and the rural landscape and the food that is produced here. But so many of us, even that we're right here, aren't able to appreciate that because we get all of our food across the counter with refrigeration and heavy lights and 70s music playing in the background. And we've got great supermarkets here, and we're all going to keep shopping there. But it's a really good opportunity for really affordable produce that's local and to make the connection between the urban and rural interface in our community. So I think that there's definitely plenty of need for fresh food for both models, not just to exist, but to expand, because we would all like to have a farmer's market or a farm stand on the riverfront and other places in the community. And so I think we're all hopeful both of these models will really thrive in terms of promoting health, promoting appreciation for the agriculture in the county and in the region, and bringing people together in neighborhoods and in our downtown to really not just celebrate the food, but to celebrate an opportunity to spend time with each other and have community events and what have you. So it's a really exciting project for a small amount of investment and some resources from the state and federal governments to help make it happen, and a lot of volunteer leadership from the chamber on this project. So much appreciated. All right, item 11 is consideration of Resolution 1045 adopting a regional air quality control measure that includes urban forests to attain air quality goals. This is a regional air quality control measure. Where is it coming from? Who's the regional air quality board? Is this Mr. Beer's board or the Sacramento board?
SACOG.
Oh, my board.
Your board.
Okay.
It's sponsored by the Sacramento Tree Foundation, but it was a study between the Center for Urban Forest Research and the Sacramento Tree Foundation, funded by, I believe, SACOG, that's right.
Okay. So it's not a project adopted by the air board, the actual air board.
Yes, apparently. I have Cindy Blaine here from the Sacramento Tree Foundation who may help me answer some questions from the audience. Yes.
So is it? We're part of the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District. Mr. Beers ably represents our residents on that and businesses on that board. Is that?
Good evening. Yes, this is a multi-air quality district project. So Sac Metro is heading it up, and Yolo Solano is on it, as well as Feather River. There's 4 others in addition to Sac Metro.
Okay. That's my other question. Thanks. Item 13 is consideration and award of contracts to 4 different vendors for the purchase of office furniture, lounge furniture, round tables, and stage lighting and rep plot for the various rooms and programming in the new community center located at 1075 West Capitol Avenue. Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, this is an item that we've continued a couple times, and it's kind of a tough item in this economic environment. Basically, what we're trying to do is we've got a civic center that's going to be opening in several months. And what this is going to do is furnish that to the point where it can actually be useful. So to a certain extent, it's like a street. When we project out a street, we need to put in the shrubbery, put in the lights and that type of thing. So what my concern is that to make sure that we, when we go through this, we try to spend as least money as possible to make the Civic Center just functional with no bells and whistles, because we just really don't have the money to do this, or to spend, a whole lot of money on this. So I know that we've got some bids here, but the extent any of those can be modified to, reduce costs as much as we can, I'd certainly like to see that. And also, to the extent we can identify other funds that may be able to, cost savings or whatever, to help fund these things, I think that would be, make this a lot more palatable. But, part of the problem with not doing this is I think we could potentially have a civic center that is not furnished, that would have nothing in it, would not be able to be open, and I think that would be a huge eyesore and a huge shot to West Sacramento. So the timing of this is very unfortunate, but I think it has to be done. But I do want to emphasize that we need to try and save as much as we can on this, and so it was just that comment.
All right, we do have one request for public comment on the item, and that's by Martin Flatley.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'd just like to echo what Councilman Johansson just said. As a resident of this city, taxpayer here, I'd like to keep, we just went through a very painful budget process. People have lost their jobs here. We've curtailed city services to the community and the taxpayers. $500,000 or close to that's a lot of money. And I understand the issues of the building and wanting to occupy that. I'm all about that. I want the city to grow. I want the city to look good. I want businesses to come here. I'm co-owner of a private sector business, so I'm all on board with that. It's just that right now, with this budget issue that we've just gone through, and by the city manager's own words, and mine being in the private sector side, I mean, there's no end in sight as far as the economy is concerned. So I would like the city council to be very careful about how they spend our tax dollars and try to keep our services up. All of the services, water, police, fire, parks, everything that we voted for as far as a city here. So I don't want to take up a whole lot of your gentlemen's time. I know you got a lot of things going on, and I appreciate the work that you and the city staff has done for all of us that live here. But if you could please be very careful on how we spend our monies, because it's not looking good for the next 3 years or more. Okay? Thank you very much.
Mr. Flatley? Let me just say on this, we've been working on this project in one way or another for 20 years, just about, since the Civic Center Task Force. And although it's called the Community Center, for those who are new to town or have been watching this as closely as we've had to for 20 years, this is the replacement of our senior center. And a lot of people have worked very hard in this community, many of whom are no longer with us, in order to make sure that we had a functional senior center. It's the largest and fastest growing part of our community, an important part of our heritage, folks who have given a lot and contributed a lot in the community over a long period of time. Seniors in the city through the Golden Years Club way back when, went out and raised money to get this facility started. We got a congressional grant to help pay for this facility. It's not mainly, property tax money and that sort of thing, in order to make this center, worthy of our community and worthy of our seniors. And we made a commitment that we were going to replace an old, dysfunctional, embarrassing, frankly, physically embarrassing senior center that's not worthy of our community or the people who have, given so much of their lives here, and we were going to replace that. And so we went to Congress and asked for that money and got that a grant to be able to support the construction of this project. And so I absolutely agree, and I know the whole council does, that we need to be very circumspect about the money that we're spending. But I guess I don't want to agree with the proposition that it should be barely functional, or just barely functional. Bells and whistles, for sure. I mean, I know we've agreed that in addition to the senior center, we would have historical displays and that sort of thing, and those are important. And I know that they've been important to Mr. Johansson and to others. They're a key part of that facility, but this needs to be a place that seniors in our community can be proud of, and that can enjoy and can be a part of the central core of the city. So I know you've gotten the message, do not, don't spend lavishly. We don't want to see marble countertops all over the center. But when we say lounge furniture and round tables and that sort of thing, it's not jacuzzis, and it's not a relaxation place. I mean, it is to be a place for people of all generations, but particularly for seniors in our community to be able to use, and we want to keep faith with them and the contribution that they've made in our community. And I know you've worked hard to make sure that we have local contractors and companies that will help recycle whatever we spend on this project. That money will flow back in terms of people that are earning wages here and paying taxes here as well to the maximum extent possible. But so I certainly concur. Please, be thrifty, but do right by the seniors of our community who deserve a quality senior center.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I do want to thank staff for sending the letter. I know last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess now, I had made the suggestion that we look at State Department, Federal Department, County Department, whatever it may be that has excess furnitures and all the other kinds of things that were, in essence, sort of government kind of furniture stuff. And I appreciate the fact that everybody taken the time to go and look and to really make the determination that it really wasn't quite worthy of going into, our senior center, community center, and here in West Sacramento. I would echo both what Mr. Johansson said and Mayor Cabaldan said. I mean, it's a senior center, and it needs to be adequately supplied. I don't think that everything is going to be real frilly. And at the same time, I think what really sort of hit us up here, and I probably speak for everybody, and it was the timing. I mean, the timing of this couldn't have been any worse than it was. I mean, we were going through some really gut-wrenching decisions as far as employees and friends and colleagues and all of those things that we do from a city council perspective with all of what goes on here. And it was just the timing. It just didn't make any sense. And so I appreciate the extra effort to go try to find stuff cheaper and look through things, and so I appreciate that. But I'm going to support this item.
All right, thank you. And then on item 15, Mr. City Attorney, there's a...
Actually, that's item 16.
I'm sorry, 16 has a clarification.
Yes.
Modification to the recommended action.
Yes, if I could restate the recommended action, we just need to make certain that it's entirely consistent with
Item
the way
16.
the lease reads. The recommended action would be, 1, approve the municipal lease between the City of West Sacramento and Lease Source Financial Services for a copier program with RICO Inc., and authorize the city manager to execute the lease. And 2, designate the lease as a qualified tax-exempt obligation.
Okay. So that'll, when the motion's made, it'll be with that modification. Item 15, is, which Mr. Villegas had requested, is consideration and approval of the Riverwalk Trail and Levee Maintenance Road Project and adoption of Resolution 10-49 for the project's mitigated negative declaration. Mayor Pro Tem Villegas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to just make sure I understood. The path itself, I know, had to be moved quite a bit. It looks like a tremendous amount of work, my goodness. But I wanted to just make sure. So it's the same materials? It's going to look the same as the one on the north side, right? Because I'm reading asphalt paved, and I just...
No, sir, it will not.
It will not. So
It
it's
will not.
completely
That was a
different?
consequence of the redesign.
I wondered about that. So it's still going to look I mean, I'm trying to imagine what it looked like, and the pictures didn't really do it justice, I'm sure, but
No, the picture didn't, and I apologize for that. The surface of the trail will be a 12-foot wide asphalt trail, so it'll look like essentially half of a roadway section with 2 4-foot compacted decomposed granite shoulders. And at the patio locations, there'll be some decorative concrete bands to signal that the person's arriving at something different. And those patios will be paved with concrete pavers, a different texture, different look.
So, can I just, so, I mean, is it attractive? Does it look, I mean, it's on the river, it's gonna be, it's an essential piece of what we've all been talking about in terms of public access and walkways, and that route is going to continue further south and continue north. I mean, it's essentially going to be the go-to piece on the riverfront for quite some time.
You've asked the loaded question, so I'm going to do my best to answer it. Attractive is a really subjective question. I believe it is. What this is going to do is open the territory in a way that's very accessible, and it will attract use. The surface is going to be easy to use. It's going to be well marked. There are going to be 4 connections into the Bridge District roadway network. There'll be a correct connection directly onto Tower Bridge Gateway. There will be at least 2 overhead shade structures that are going to be artfully executed. It'll be neat to look at. There'll be seating. At one location, we'll be able to run a water fountain in. It is not going to look like a typical Class 1 bike trail. It's going to be in a very, very different setting. It's an attractive setting in and of itself. The lighting that we selected is designed to actually decorate the pathway both at night and during the daytime. They're attractive fixtures. So within the constraints of our budget, within the constraints of the time allowed to execute the project and still use the Proposition 50 grant, within the constraints of operating on a federal levy, we believe and are confident that this will be a very attractive, safe, comfortable amenity for the Bridge District and for the city of West Sacramento.
Okay. I have one more question.
Mr. Beers.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. On page 3, you said that the project must be finished by April 1st, 2010.
Yeah, so we're done. No, I'm sorry, it's a typo.
So I was going to walk along it tonight. I just want to make sure the lights are on.
I don't even know why I'm here. I apologize. This is a typographic error.
Make sure we weren't a year late.
Thank you for catching that. There is another typo, and I'll wait till you catch that one. But if you...
I didn't think of it as a typo.
No, this is a really bad typographic error. I'm sorry about it. However, the schedule it follows in the following bullet is correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then it goes wrong again at the end of the report.
Yeah, right.
There's no end to mistakes, sir. It's the right project, though.
Thank you.
Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, Dave, a little bit off topic, but what is the plan for security along this trail? Have we gotten to that point yet to see if there's going to be any patrols? Because one of the things about having this type of trail is to make sure people can actually use it during reasonable hours. So can you just kind of briefly go over what the status of the security is?
The focus at this stage is on integrating security into the actual physical design so that the facility that's created is inherently secure. And that's done through several measures. One is that the surface itself is readily accessible. That there are multiple points of connection to the internal roadway network and the external roadway network, that there's nighttime lighting. So this facility will be lit throughout an extended day. And the lighting is of sufficient intensity for people to see and be seen. There will be access controls at each of the roadway connections to prohibit motor vehicle gaining access. So we've done what we can to create an inherently safe facility that once a person's on it, they can see where they're going, but they can also see who's on the facility at the same time. So it meets the guidance of what's called SEPTED, or Community Safety Through Environmental Design. The question of active policing once the project is constructed is frankly out of the bounds of my control and the budget. However, introducing a paved surface in this area, that substantially increases the efficiency of policing. Right now, if a police car wants to go out there, they're going to do wheel spins in sand. So there'll be a drivable surface. This is a surface that's designed to accommodate not just police cars and regular maintenance vehicles for the flood protection program, but also fire trucks and also trucks loaded up with riprap for emergency flood fighting. So the facility is as safe as it can be. And the question of frequency of police inspection on the site is one that I can't answer, but they'll certainly be able to look into it from any roadway connection. There'll be a lot of vantage points to surveil.
I think once this is developed, we'll be looking at a little bit deeper. We've talked about it on particularly riverfront with the California Indian Heritage Center is proposed, that whole section, to have rangers possibly patrol that. But this would be more of a PD type thing that eventually we're going to have to kind of keep those options open on how we're going to keep that secure and safe for people to use. Thank you.
Dave, so the Mill Street is not part of our first phase of streets, right?
It is.
It is. So this trail will connect directly to Mill at the
Correct.
end? So there'll be a continuous path from the
Mill-
Tower Bridge, essentially?
Yes.
That you could take all the way to Mill?
Correct.
Okay, so it seems like this will be a very attractive bicycle route, including a bicycle commute route. But we're not creating in a lot of places where they have these kind of facilities, there's some demarcation of the portion of the trail or the asphalt that is for cyclists who might be traveling at fairly high speeds, since this is a very good commute route.
Yep.
And then a demarcation of where pedestrians are expected to go. Have we considered any of those sorts of treatments?
We did.
Because it's different from the Riverwalk Promenade that we have today, which is sort of, because of it's so grand, it sort of shouts that this is not a Class 1 bike facility.
Right.
But an asphalt path will look like a high-speed bike freeway, but there'll be people walking on it, hopefully, too. And so we want to make sure that it's safe and for both.
We did consider that. We looked at the examples around us. Frequently, where there's a wide Class 1 trail, Caltrans sometimes requires a dashed line down the middle. We've looked at the possibility of introducing that to this pathway, as, for example, on the American River Parkway. In other circumstances, such as the Riverwalk Park, where there's a large promenade, we don't mark it because the speeds are low and people figure it out. This is a case where we've looked at striping, and we're not entirely convinced that it's the right way to go, that what it does is it would introduce a false sense of security that people would actually mind the stripe. So there's going to have to be a little bit of figuring out. People are going to have to see the rules of the road. That's why it's so wide also. We've got 12.5 feet of pavement and an additional 4 feet on either side, very hard surface for pedestrians. It's a bit of an unknown. It's a middle ground that we haven't entirely figured out how to operate yet.
I think here's the challenge with that approach, is that the cyclists will exist almost immediately, right? And whereas the pedestrians and the residents and the folks, shopping and enjoying the waterfront on foot will take much longer periods of time, because the cyclists there'll be lots of cyclists using it from Southport, from
Right.
Old West Sacramento immediately.
They're going to smoke it
By
up.
the time that there's significant localized pedestrian activity and visitor and tourist pedestrian activity, the cyclists will already have in their mind that it's their facility. Right? We have seen this actually on portions of the American River Bike Trail. So I'm second guessing. I'm not going to say you should do one thing or the other, but I would really pay some attention to the cultural evolution of how this facility is going to operate. Because I think you're right. If it was just going to plop down and the place was fully developed, people would start to figure it out as they're exploring this new territory together. But it's going to be a bike freeway at the outset, principally, and then pedestrians are going to have to sort of fight their way to reclaim part of it. So I'm concerned about it. And
What would you think of the idea of, if I were to consult with some of our colleagues at the Sacramento area bike advocates who have a lot of experience throughout the region with different kinds of settings? I could talk with them and gain some of their advice. Would you ultimately you're going to see the construction contract. And shall I make adjustments on the basis of their advice on this issue, or would you like to advise me at this
I'm not
time?
trying to get into that much detail. I'm raising the issue. You are on bike trails more than I am, even. So you and your colleagues, in your professional judgment, if you want to consult with others, that's fine. I want to raise it, sort of plant a flag on it for you to just make sure that we're considering how that's going to operate in a way that's both safe but also is welcoming to non-bicycle commuters.
Okay, I'll do it.
Maybe we can have a kiosk down there. We'll pass out clubs on the pedestrian.
We could have red light cameras for cyclists.
We can do
Generate money.
that. We have the technology. Not the budget, but we have the technology.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no further questions or discussion on the consent agenda, so we have items 3 through 17, minus item 5, with the revised clarified recommendation, item 16. It's moved by Mr. Johannesson and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Villegas. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. The hour of 7:30 having arrived, we'll proceed to our time-set agenda. Item 18, which is a public hearing in consideration of Resolution 10-46, declaring intent to vacate a public right-of-way easement located on Delta Lane. Yeah. Ms. Allen?
Wiped them out.
Good evening, Mayor Cabalden and members of the council. In 2000, Caltrans relinquished fee title to State Route 275, now known as Tower Bridge Gateway. Upon completion of the plans for the at-grade intersection at Garden Street and West Capitol Avenue, city staff identified a remnant parcel approximately 1.9 acres in size adjacent to the parcel owned by the Redevelopment Agency. The subject parcel is located south of Tower Bridge Gateway, east of Garden Street, north of Delta Lane, and west of the RDA parcel. The abandonment of the easement will assist with the future development of the Bridge District, and the subject parcel, combined with the agency-owned parcel, are slated to eventually contain 175 multifamily housing units. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions for staff at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing on item 18. We don't have any requests to speak, but does anyone wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Further council questions or discussion? Been moved by Mr. Beers and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Villegas. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. Item 19 is public hearing in consideration of Resolution 10-50, rescinding Resolution 10-31, and declaring an intent to vacate a public right-of-way easement located on Tower Street. Ms. Allen?
On February 17th, the council approved a development agreement between the city and Smart Growth Investors, and a portion of the DA described vacation of a remnant right-of-way in the Bridge District, which is located on Tower Street. This remnant is also included in the development agreement as part of a land swap between the city and Smart Growth Investors. On May 19th, the city adopted Resolution 10-31, declaring an intent to vacate this portion of Tower Street. However, due to a staff error, the item was placed on the consent agenda rather than having a public hearing, and due to this fact, that's why staff is requesting the rescission of Resolution 10-31 and the adoption of Resolution 10-50.
All right, are there any questions? Is this a parcel where the tree that we discussed earlier, is it on this parcel?
On the same street, yes.
On the same street, but is it on this easement?
The parcel that is slated to be swapped is the parcel with the tree, the parcel that Smart Growth Investors owns.
So, but not the parcel that
No.
the subject of this,
No.
the parcel that would be vacated is not that parcel?
No.
Okay, understood. All right, then we'll open the public hearing on item 19. Does anyone wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Mayor Pro Tem Villegas moves and Mr. Beers seconds the item. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. Item 20 is a community development block grant public hearing for consideration of Resolution 10-36, authorizing an application for 2010 CDBG general allocation funding, and Resolution 10-38, authorizing matching funds for the grant if awarded. Resolution 10-37, authorizing a transfer of $40,058 in program income to the Homeless Coordination Project, and an amendment to the Multifamily Acquisition and Rehabilitation Program guidelines. And the council also has a memo at our desks from the city manager regarding the item with a revised version of the resolution. Ms. Collis?
Thank you. The State Department of Housing and Community Development has issued a notice of funding availability for CDBG, our Community Development Block Grant, General Allocation Funds for 2010. And we're here this evening requesting that the City Council conduct a public hearing to receive citizen input on activities for this funding application, and then to approve a resolution authorizing the funding application. In addition, we have two other CDBG-related items for the public hearing, as the mayor just mentioned, which are a transfer of funds to fund the homeless coordination project and an amendment to our multifamily acquisition rehab guidelines. CDBG funds are required to benefit one of the 3 CDBG national objectives. The first is benefit to targeted income group households, defined as households at or below 80% of the HUD area median for Yolo County for us. And those income limits are in your staff report. Second of the three objectives is elimination of slum or blight activity, and the third is urgent need, which in CDBG terms refers to emergencies such as earthquakes or floods. We'll start out first with the submission of the application for 2010 general allocation funding. The city is eligible to apply for up to $800,000, depending on what type of application we submit this year. And there's a number of different combinations of programs and projects. We may also set aside 10% of our request for an activity that is not rated or ranked, and they call this a 10% set-aside activity. The funding request for that is recommended by staff is a $600,000 request, which would be composed of what the state is this year calling a housing combination program, $435,000 for multifamily rehabilitation. That would be on a program, not a project basis, which means that eligible owners of rental property would apply to the city for rehab money. Then $60,000 for our existing first-time homebuyer assistance program, and a 10% set aside of $60,000 to provide additional preschool scholarships for the universal preschool program. There was one mistake in the staff report I need to let you know about. It's the last line of the section on the 10% set aside for preschool scholarships. They will not be limited to 50% of the tuition. They will pay 100% of the tuition, which is consistent with our other UP for West Sac programs. But they will provide about 12 to 15 children with a year of preschool. And this is going to be a 30-month grant, so it'll probably be split up over 2 school years. So it'll be six children per year is what we're anticipating. Does the council have any questions on the CDBG general application?
I do.
Mr. Kristoff.
Yeah, Louise, a number of years ago when we were looking at Measure J and K, we attached some of the preschool writers and that sort of thing that can be funded through J and K. And I think we also had the discussion when we were talking about developer fees and things like that when we did the universal preschool. And I can distinctly remember the council, and maybe the council's changed, but I can distinctly remember the council's conversation, because I know I asked the question, that this was going to be something that was generated, the monies that are necessary for preschool were going to be generated by preschool. Or it could be generated by the Measure J and K funds. But that was going to be the extent of it. And I don't know what's changed, because from what I read here and from what the addendum says, the other part there, that there's going to be $60,000 or $65,000 generated by Measure J and K, by Measure K. And that's going there. We said it would, and I have no objections to that. But these are new dollars. These are additional dollars. These are CBDG dollars. And I don't quite understand why that is part of this whole budget, this whole agenda item.
Can I chime in maybe a little bit before you get? Part of, I think, the conversation included, and you're absolutely right, we did talk about how we would fund the program, but the other half of the conversation was that we would sustain the program, the ongoing costs, the ongoing operational costs, through grants outside of the developer fees. And those grants are exactly what we're talking about this evening. So we did stick to exactly what we said, which is the J&K components would kick in a small portion. The developer fees would then be used as a one-time fixed capital cost, and then we would pursue other funding sources through either State 5, state and federal grant funding sources to continue to fund the operational costs. So I think this, and if you want to add on, but from my understanding, my recollection, we're doing precisely what we said we were going to do.
Well, the change that's before you, which is a change to the resolution, does not alter the city's budget as it was brought before the council previously, which is $65,000 for universal preschool from Measure K. The impact fees, again, are for capital costs, not for tuition. So this would be new funds added to the program, and it would be grant funds.
Okay.
The CDBG income limits are a little higher than some of those state programs that Mayor Pro Tem Villegas mentioned. The first 5 California and the first 5 YOLO. So there would be some children who cannot be supported through that program that would be eligible for a CDBG subsidy. So it would provide additional children that normally would not be eligible a subsidy.
Do we have to operate it that way? I mean, we don't have, we're just trying to make the core UPK program financially sustainable. I mean, do we have the ability to say the CDBG money is can only be used for that more narrowly targeted group?
We're not saying that it will only be used, but it will allow some children that are excluded from preschool subsidies based on their income because they're just barely over. The income limits are fairly close, but it's a difference of like a few $1,000s annually. So there are a few families that will now be eligible for subsidies that wouldn't normally.
I guess I'm just raising a policy question of whether that's a good idea. I mean, if there's limited amount of money available, not just next year and not for 30 months, but on the long-term basis, we're still trying to figure out how to sustain it. This is one of the reasons why universal preschool is identified as a top priority on our strategic plan management agenda, trying to figure out how to make this financially sustainable. I guess I'm reluctant to broaden eligibility when we don't have a solid financial foundation that's sustainable over the long run for the eligibility pool that we already have. We ought to be targeting those resources, and if that frees up other resources that were in universal preschool that can be then held for another year, then we ought to be doing that rather than adding more, broadening the base of a program that we're not really sure how we're going to pay for over the long run yet anyway. So I'm supportive of the item for sure, for all the reasons that Mayor Pro Tem Villegas outlined. I mean, CDBG we're often using for things that are catching poverty, once it's already happened, right? Where we're focused on, if somebody's, down on their luck and they need housing or, to renovate the mobile home park or whatever. Those are valuable, but our longer term strategy has to be to break that cycle in the first place. And the academic results that we've been seeing from the universal preschool program show that it has really powerful potential to do that. So in terms of the CDBG program's purpose of attacking poverty, in our community, it's the right thing to do, and this seems like a very sensible approach. I just want to be careful about broadening the scope of the universal preschool program even a little bit until when what we really need to be doing is making sure that what we already have is something that we can sustain over the long run.
Well, Justine Jimenez from the preschool program here is here. If you have those type of sustainability questions directly related to the program, she might have more information than I would have on that. However, just to make sure one thing is clear, when you're talking about CDBG public service money, which is what this would be, you can't supplant existing local funds. So, for example, if we served 430 students this year and now we add CDBG money, we would need to serve 436 next year. We can't take local funds that were used for subsidies this year and put it into operations, just because we can use CDBG money for subsidies. So I'm not sure if that was a part of what you're saying, but I just want to make sure that is clear.
All right, we don't have local funds to make this program work for the
And
430, whatever the
8%
number
of that
is.
money, which is not a whole lot, but it's $4,800, goes to activity delivery, which will cover the staff time for Justine and Shauna in her office to operate this particular program.
Okay.
Also, just so you'll understand, the $65,000 that we're using as the cash match for the Universal Preschool Program improves the scoring of the entire application. So it actually does make this a stronger application for the other two activities that we're requesting funds for. So there is that benefit, but of course that's not a reason to do a major policy change, but it is something you should recognize. So did you want to have Justine come up and, okay. Any other questions on this item? Okay, so the second issue was amendments to the multifamily acquisition and rehabilitation program guidelines. These were initially brought before council so that the city could set up a multifamily acquisition rehab revolving loan fund, and currently that is where all our housing or general allocation CDBG program income is going into. The changes to these guidelines would allow this program to become more usable for projects that serve extremely low-income households. So it would make the loan guidelines more lenient for those types of projects, provided their financial performance and their documentation of financial information shows that this is required for their long-term viability. The changes are to allow the use of the program income as primary financing, where currently it's only allowable for gap financing. To allow financing of up to 100% loan to value. Currently, the limit is 90%. This would only be allowed if the project can show other additional assurance and compensating factors that would ensure that the city's loan is secure. To allow zero interest amortized loans. Currently, our guidelines only allow 3 to 5% interest rates on amortized loans. And those are items that would only apply for projects where we're rehabbing 100% units that are for extremely low-income households. The next item, to extend loan terms for residual receipt loans, would apply to any project funded under this program, and that is to extend the loan term, the maximum loan term, from 30 years to 55 years, because we often require a 55-year term of affordability in order to count those units towards our redevelopment agency required number of housing units, low-income housing units. The next item, the next two items also apply to the entire program, not just extremely affordable units, and that was to include utility allowances in the allowable rent calculations, and to require builder's risk insurance during construction, depending upon the value of the project, to ensure that the project is completed if there are issues. The multifamily rehab only program that we discussed a few minutes ago for the current application, for the CDBG application, the guidelines would also include these changes, and so they would be applicable to that program also. However, those guidelines will come before the council at a later date. Any questions on this item?
Mr. Kristoff.
Yeah, on the housing combination program, when it says multifamily rehab, that is just rehab of existing units?
Correct. The state CDBG program would not let us do acquisition or new construction. They said we could do it as a housing combo program if we did rehab of existing units only.
Okay, so then if you follow that and you go to home ownership assistance, and does the owner participate in making a monthly payment?
Okay, the homeownership assistance in the
Yeah,
grant
in the,
application?
it says homeowner assistance, home ownership assistance on page 4. Owner occupied rehab, and then right under that.
Okay, those are the activities that we considered for funding under the grant application, and determined staff recommendation is not for those items. We're not applying for the full amount of homeownership assistance that we
Okay, so
would
you're
be
not
eligible
applying for the
for.
800,000, you're applying for the 600,000.
Correct.
Okay.
And we,
So even, okay, let's go back.
I'm sorry, the homeownership assistance, that's an incorrect. We would only be eligible to apply for 400,000 if we applied for homeownership assistance only.
Okay.
It would be $800,000 if we applied for that and a project, or that and one other activity.
Well, both of
So
my
that wasn't
questions,
clear.
we'll get to it, I guess, if I can figure out how to ask it. Is there ownership participation? I mean, if we assist someone with a low-income house, and they want to buy the house, and so we give them grant funds, is there a participation as far as the owner is concerned? Do they have to say, okay, we can pay $200, that's all we can pay, but we'll pay $200, and then the program, in essence, picks up the other $1,000, we'll say?
No, we have, the multifamily rehab program is multifamily, so this would be not homeownership. These
Okay.
units would not be appropriate for homeownership.
So is there a
So-
portion of their rent that is their own?
They are all, normally, tenants are required to pay 30% of their income towards the
Okay.
rent.
Okay.
We usually base that on the unit size, so for any individual family, it may be a little more, a little less.
Okay, so what happens if they do not make the payment?
If they cannot pay their, a family is required to pay their rent. And generally, most property owners require that the family have at least 2 times the rent and income before they'll even take them into a property. So that has nothing to do with CDBG or to the city. That is just kind of standard
Okay.
property management policy.
I guess my concern is
So-
do we, before we screen somebody that is going to rent a facility, or do we make sure that they can adequately pay their portion of what they're supposed to pay?
Our guidelines do not provide that type of screening. Usually that's a property management issue.
Okay.
So it's not something that's in our guidelines that's required, but, a property manager is not going to want to move someone in if they're
I
going to have to turn
understand.
around and evict
No, I
them.
do.
So-
I mean, I think that this is very systematic of what's going on nationwide, statewide, whatever else it is. People are getting into homes that they cannot afford, and then they don't make the payment, and you go through the foreclosure process, and in essence, that is really just snowball. And so I think this is really sort of systematic of some of that. All I want to make sure is that, number one, that either if it's a renter or a homeowner, that there's something catches it, so that somebody looks at their incomes and said, they can truly afford this. Because that's what happened in the housing market, is nobody did that. And I just want to make sure that it's either the project, or not the project manager, but the manager of the apartment complex, or whatever it is, that they look at salaries to make sure that people aren't going to default. That's all.
Well, first of all, they must verify the income of the tenants because they have to show that their income qualified for, under our regulatory agreement.
Okay.
So we're looking at their maximum, are they over the maximum income? If so, they're ineligible. But at the same time, the property owner would be able to see if they would not be able to afford that project.
All right.
Now, on our first-time homebuyer program, we absolutely look at that. We have both a maximum income limit, but we also have minimums because the tenant, not tenant, but it would be the homebuyer, cannot, their income cannot be, they have to make at least enough income to let me put this correctly. their housing payment can't be more than 35% of their income in our first-time homebuyer program. And so we absolutely look at that. If their housing payment is more than 35% of their income, they cannot get a first-time homebuyer loan through us. And we've been very successful. I believe we have had one unit go through foreclosure, but the woman and her husband both lost their jobs. And there was absolutely nothing that could really be done on that case. Other than that, we have over 50 homes that we've made loans on and have not had that's been the only foreclosure.
Okay, good, very good.
Mr. Johannesson?
No, I was just actually just going to reinforce your point that the income qualification or the ability to pay for these is really a function of how much they earn versus what the mortgage payment is. So back when there was a little more responsibility in home mortgages, they used to look at a 35% or 30 to 35% before someone will even give you a loan for, and so they're really getting back to that now. So they have the income to qualify, and what this does is helps makes up the gap, I think, based on what they can qualify for and the value of the actual mortgage.
All right, are there any further questions before we open the public hearing on this item?
Okay, there's one more.
Oh, Lord.
Hurry, girl.
Okay, transfer of CDBG program income to the Homeless Coordination Project. The Homeless Coordination Project, since 1991, the city has provided funding towards the cost of a half-time Yolo County homeless coordinator, and also a portion of overhead for the cold weather shelter program at the Yolo Wayfarer mission. And the city's current portion of that is $20,029 per year. This year, for 2009-2010, we use CDBG program income by programming it into an existing CDBG grant. What we're asking for with this resolution would be to simply move that money out of the multifamily acquisition rehab program to fund the remainder of that contract for the final 2 years, which would be an amount of $40,058.
All right, are there any questions before we open the public hearing on this item? Thank you. All right, then we will open the public hearing on item 20. We have no requests, but does anyone wish to address the council on item 20? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and it's been moved by Mr. Beers and seconded by Mr. Johannesson. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye, any opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
All right, that motion carries.
After all that. You know what? I should go ahead and support that. No, I will. I'll change my vote. I'm going to go ahead and support it. All right.
I would have felt bad if I had to sit through all
I
that
know.
and didn't get to vote.
Yeah.
All right, that motion carries unanimously. Item 21 is presentation and discussion of ordinance 10-11 regarding proposed amendments to the West Sacramento zoning ordinance. Mr. Tilley, Ms. White?
Good evening, Mayor Cabal and the members of the City Council. The purpose of this workshop is to introduce proposed changes to the zoning ordinance involving temporary off-site signs, non-conforming mobile home parks, and massage therapy. Presentations will be made by David Tilley and I will summarize changes involving temporary off-site signs, and David will cover the rest of the proposed changes. The temporary off-site ordinance was adopted in 2008, and it currently regulates off-site weekend directional signs. And it was adopted to be consistent with Civil Code 713, which requires cities to permit property owners to have off-site signs advertising the sale, lease, or exchange of real property. Staff introduced changes to the ordinance a few months ago, and at that time, the Sacramento Association of Realtors commented that the proposed changes did not allow off-site signs for open houses. Additional changes were made to accommodate off-site open house signs, and staff is returning to the council with a complete package of changes to the temporary sign ordinance. The changes include a minor amendment to the temporary weekend directional sign provisions, which would prohibit weekend directional signs on city-owned properties. The second set of changes will allow off-site signs that are not limited to the weekend. One sign would be allowed for 4 lots or less, and 2 off-site signs would be allowed for subdivisions. The third set of changes would allow off-site kiosks for master plan developments, and the last set of changes would allow what are called real property event directional signs rather than open house signs, only because the sign must be available to any real property that's available for sale, lease, or exchange. So that would include residential in addition to commercial and industrial properties as well. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the changes on May 20th, and with that, I will turn over to David to cover the rest of the proposed amendments.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Two topics that I will discuss with you this evening to close out our presentation on this item. First is related to mobile home parks. As the council is certainly aware, the Housing Division has obtained grant funds to do help fund various improvements at existing mobile home parks in the community. And when this was presented to the Planning Division, noted that it could have maybe caught up in a bit of a technicality because many of the mobile home parks in town are non-conforming for various different standards, and generally non-conforming uses, the amount of improvements that are allowed are very limited. So we're proposing an amendment to the non-conforming use regulations in the zoning ordinance to permit various minor improvements to existing non-conforming mobile home parks. So in the matter that these grant funds may be expended and those mobile home parks may receive those improvements. The second topic for tonight as part of this is related to massage therapy. Except under very limited circumstances, massage therapy in West Sacramento is treated as an adult use and is therefore subject to significant restrictions from geographic requirements, spacing requirements from schools and parks and other similar type facilities. And in recognizing that this does limit the ability for legitimate massage practice to be established in our community, we have proposed some amendments related to massage therapy that would allow massage therapy to be a business such as a Mellow Me Out or other similar type business to be open in town and not be subject to the adult use regulations. So how we would accomplish this would be provide a new definition of massage therapy that's provided at the bottom of page 4 of your staff report, and then massage therapy as a land use subject to this definition would be added to the land use matrix and therefore become a permitted use in many of our commercial districts, the waterfront zone, mixed use zone, et cetera. And so with that, Sandra and I would be happy to answer any of your questions regarding any of these topics this evening.
Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, Dave, just on this, the massage thing, what can we do to make sure that legitimate businesses are in West Sac? Because I know this is an issue all over on what is a legitimate place and what is not a legitimate place. And is this, do you feel this will be, we've got enough control over this? There's enough of a distinction that we'll be able to see what's happening without raids or anything like that?
Yeah, this originally we had proposed to make some changes to the existing definition of massage that's in the adult business section of the zoning ordinance, and we backed away from that for a number of reasons and really crafted a new definition, and largely in part was from the Planning Commission's direction. And this definition was crafted pretty strategically to formally exclude those elements of this type of business that could be that lend itself to become an adult use. And we still also have in the business license section of the municipal code some additional requirements in there for massage practitioners that need to obtain additional licensing through the business license that's over and above what a standard business license would provide. So in our estimation, this particular definition, along with our existing business license, would be adequate to hopefully avoid this, because it clearly is a fine line between where the speed would be a legitimate therapeutic practice. And
well, does the, we talked about a similar concept with the medical marijuana facilities and having the PD involved with some aspect of the licensing, because they've got more information on operators and things like that. Would this go through the PD as well?
The existing business licensing section, which is 5.12, does involve the police department as it pertains to massage. So that's already on the books.
Okay.
Mr. Beers.
On the mobile home park item, I'm in agreement that we need to do this, but can we make it conditional that they're assigned a member to our mobile home park improvement program? Know that the park that's receiving, it's a non-conforming park. We're trying to get them to at least operate under a certain set of standards, which we created. So can we limit the ability to make these improvements, that also they have to condition that they signed up to the city's mobile home park program?
We could take a look at that. We may be able to do that. The concept here was being done specifically with the idea in mind of assistance.
I agree, and we want to provide assistance, and there was an earlier item to provide more resources, but I only want to see us do it to a park that's willing to play the whole game with the city in terms of making all the operating agreements and operate in accordance with something that the city's interested in seeing happen at that park.
I think we should take a look at that.
Yeah.
There may be a way to
Okay.
craft something that would say, provided they enter into an agreement with the city.
Right, because it's an option. I mean,
Right.
they don't have to sign it, and they don't have to take our money, but if they take our money, or we facilitate the money, and we created the code to allow a non-conforming use, then I think we should get them to also operate in accordance with the standards the city's agreed to.
Yeah,
So it's a voluntary effort on their part.
I think we may be able to do that. We can look at that when it comes back for your first
Okay,
reading.
thank you.
On the sign piece, I'm very concerned about the public property usage as one issue, and the second is on violators. Because no matter what rules we've adopted, and I'm not talking about, individual homeowners having an open house. I'm talking about, national companies that come in here and just completely flaunt and abuse our laws and restrictions. So first, on the public property issue, the proposed ordinance says no sign shall be permitted in the public right-of-way or property owned by the city. But there are other public properties in the city, for example, school district properties, but also redevelopment agency-owned properties as well. And so I'm wondering if that owned by the city is too narrow of a restriction, because the rest of later in the ordinance it says that you have to have written permission, but it's written permission from the private property owner. And so it seems like all the other non-city public properties there's a loophole here. They're not covered by either of those provisions, and I think it's important that they be covered, and the default ought to be that they're not permitted. And then second, on enforcement, in addition to our ability to prosecute misdemeanors or other violations of the chapter, which is not simple to do, it seems to me like there ought to be some self-executing enforcement in the ordinance, that if you are violating the ordinance, then your rights to have this many signs get reduced to half as many or none. Or that the Director of Community Development cannot approve a sign permit for a kiosk if you have on file, 3 violations or more. Those sorts of things that don't require us going to court and doing all those other things, but simply say, to put up these signs here is to some extent, it's a privilege that we're not extending to you if you are failing to observe the laws of our city. So I would ask that you take a look at some provisions of those nature, whether, obviously we want to make sure that they're legal, but that would that would give the developers in particular an incentive to tell the people because it's not them, they're not doing it. David Stroud's not out there putting up the signs themselves, but it would give the developers an incentive to put real controls and direction on the folks who are installing signs on their behalf. If they knew that if those folks were doing it inappropriately and putting signs in illegal places or too many of them, that they would lose their privilege to continue to have signs in the city directing folks to their properties, that we would get better compliance from the private sector without having to send police officers and then contact the district attorney for every single sign that's up. Another question I have, which is a sort of a circa 2000 Oscar Villegas question, because it's totally unrelated to the topic. I'm going to do it anyway. So today, earlier this afternoon, several nonprofit groups in the city, including Goodwill, raised a question about an ordinance that's been adopted in Sacramento, and I'm raising it here because it's about the zoning ordinance. And we do the zoning ordinance in these big chunks. So I don't know when we're going to do, you know, comprehensive zoning stuff again, maybe not for another year. So these green boxes, collection boxes that folks are encouraged by, the Gaia, I think is the name of the group that has them. And I know there's one a few blocks from my house over, you know, next to NW and KFC, and there are other places throughout the location. They're unattended donation boxes. Several of the nonprofits in the community, including Goodwill, have raised significant concerns about those boxes. They don't actually, the stuff that gets put in them is not actually donated to anything. The nonprofit status is claimed by the company that operates them because they're a charity of giving away the clothes to the needy or sending them to Africa, but they qualify for a 501c3 because they divert this from the waste stream. But they actually don't, the proceeds are all a private sector gain. And what they're actually doing is diverting stuff that would otherwise, in many cases, be donated to Goodwill and other local charities and pulling it out of that stream, and the profits all go to a company that's based in Scandinavia or something. The city of Sacramento has adopted an ordinance in February. The cities of Elk Grove and Folsom both have ordinances pending that have gone through their planning commissions and city councils. And because I know we've been concerned about revenues for local nonprofits that are already struggling, I want to see if we can take a look at. I'm happy to bring it back in the other format of a future agenda item request, but I just don't. If we don't do this for another year, I guess is my question. Is there a way to get this in process as a concept?
Yes, we'll look at it. I don't know that it will be in a year before we do additional zoning items, but we'll look at that.
Okay. And I've got the other ordinances, and you know they were very generous in sharing their whole packet of information, but something to look at as a minor matter. So, huh? I know it meets your test, but it's a little far afield of there's signs on these Gaia green boxes. Maybe that's good enough.
It's a zoning ordinance.
It's a zoning ordinance. Okay. Are there other questions for staff on this item? All right, this is a workshop only, and the public hearing and first reading of ordinance 10-11 is scheduled for July 7th. All right, thank you very much. Brings us to item 22, which is consideration of resolution 10-47, authorizing the purchase of land from the Sacramento Yolo Port District, adopt findings requisite to the purchase, and approval of a repurchase agreement by the Sacramento Yolo Port District. Ms. Kontarski.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Redevelopment Agency Board. Staff is before you this evening recommending that the board adopt Resolution 10-47, which authorizes the agency to purchase approximately 19.1 acres of land from the Port of West Sacramento for $2.7 million. It further provides for an option agreement which will allow the port to repurchase the land over a 7-year term at 1.5% interest. As the board is aware, the city began managing the port in 2005. An aggressive management plan was put in place, trimming the port's administrative staff and expenses to bring them to financial balance. Attachment 2 to your staff report, the summary of revenues and expenses, shows that most of the port's expenses are relatively fixed. The largest expense is debt service. A bond issue in 2001 to pay for the construction of the dome buildings at the port constitutes 80% of the total debt service. These bonds are expected to be paid off in 2012-13. In the meantime, there is significant burden to the port's cash flow. The port's been searching for financial assistance to provide relief to its cash flow, and at least until several companies locate at the port and open their doors for business. 2 of these companies are in the permit process currently. Several financial institutions were approached. However, the timing to get funds and the cost to borrow these funds made that alternative almost prohibitive. Redevelopment agency assistance is a viable alternative to any type of bank loans. It will be faster and less expensive to the port to get assistance from the redevelopment agency. If you refer to attachment 2 once again, you can see that it would be feasible for the port to repurchase the property over 5 years, even though the option agreement allows for a 7-year term. Tonight's action will allow the redevelopment agency to assist the port with short-term debt obligations and the payment of the 2001 bonds. After repurchase of the land, the port anticipates being in a strong financial position in fiscal year 2015-16. Before I conclude my presentation, I would like to call your attention to Section 2 of the recommended action and ask you, if you are going to further this action, that you delete the reference to the promissory note and deed of trust, as those documents would not be required for this action. That concludes my report, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
All right, Mr. Kristoff.
Yeah, Tina, if this is such a good deal for the city or the agency, why hasn't the public sector bought this piece?
Well, I think that...
Or why haven't we offered it to the public sector so that somebody can buy it?
I think there's two things that perhaps involve that, or could be discussed at that point. Number one is this particular piece of property is just to the west of the main terminal. So having a private entity in the middle of the port, I don't think is appropriate at this point. And number two, to offer this to the private sector would probably have protracted negotiations, and I think that because these bonds are due this next month, first part of July, that we didn't have time to look at that. This is as a request of the port.
But this is the site of the tankers, of the
Yes,
tank
it
use,
is.
right?
Tank farm, yes.
I mean, it makes a, I guess the other question then is, it's really twofold, because number one, the tank farm people certainly would have want to buy this at that price, I would assume, if that's a good price. And number two, this seems like the exact kind of property that the port should be continuing to hold on to, because they know it is going to be developed by the tank farms, and they can get a revenue stream from it.
Well, I think that this particular action will allow the agency to provide the assistance and provide the port the opportunity to repurchase the land. It's not, this particular transaction is not looked upon as a long-term holding for the agency on this particular land. So it's sort of short-term financial assistance to help the port get over this particular hump.
Yeah, no, is this, but is this property that was once the storage spot for the chips and things? Is that the same site?
No, I don't
No?
think it is.
Has the phase one and everything been done on this site? Okay, all right, okay, thank you, that's all it was. I mean, it just makes, I mean, I think the port has an opportunity to make a couple bucks and they're running. I don't know, I don't get it, but that's okay.
Mr. Johannesson.
I mean, I think this is a good way to go as well. It kind of keeps the property within the family, and basically, if we do have a use, the tank farms would be a good use for the port and for the city. So by keeping it under the control, at least of the most significant stakeholders, I think that's a good idea. And if the projections work out, I think it's going to be good for both parties on that end.
I'm supportive of it. I'm not sure I would agree that the port is projected to be in a strong financial position in 2015, but I mean, I supported it at the commission. This is an entirely different venue. We have a distinct fiduciary responsibility on behalf of the city that's separate from the interests of the port. And so, I mean, I think we have to, just as we did with the other property transaction in what's become the Cordish arrangement, you know, we have to, you know, assume that there's a reasonable likelihood that we will end up keeping this property. And so the questions around what is its actual value, for exactly the reasons that you said no one else would want to buy it, are the reasons that we have to be asking ourselves, what would we do with it? Right, and so I want to make sure the port doesn't have any residual, if we own the property and we want to do something with it, or we want to sell it to somebody else, what are the port's, because it's on the main terminal, does the port retain any residual control over its use over the long run?
If the port were unable to repurchase the property, meet its option payment requirements, then it would have no longer any control over it.
Okay, and the port can't put a fence, a electric security fence around it?
Cutting off the access, no.
Okay. And it would have potential other uses that don't require the port, right? In terms of access to this street and the sorts of things that you would need to have if you had an independent piece of property and may not have, and may potentially didn't have the cooperation of a port that was angry that it didn't get its property back? Would we would have an actually usable piece of property, fully unencumbered, not just legally, but from any other constraints that the port might place on us?
Yes, because this is more at the periphery, so it can actually serve as an independent parcel, although it probably not at its highest and best use. That would be for a port-related activity, which could happen even if it were owned by another entity.
Right, and is the tank farm project, would the tank farm project be viable without the cooperation of the port if we were to own this property, or?
No. I think the tank farm property is correlated with the port.
Okay. I just don't trust those people.
You don't trust the port?
That's what I'm talking about, yeah, those crazy port people. Okay. All right, further, Mayor Pro Tem Villegas?
Just a motion. I support it. I mean, I think it makes sense. I mean, I think, and actually, it's nice to see the laundry list that's laid out in the staff report in terms of the background and the potential for the port. I mean, I think we're in a very different position than we were in 2005. We're probably crazier than we were in 2005 when we took it over, but I think the staff's recommendation, and as crazy as the Port Commission is, it does make sense, so.
That motion?
That's a motion.
Okay, it's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Villegas and seconded by Mr. Beers with the deletion of the promissory note and deed of trust reference in the recommended action.
Yep.
So, seeing no further discussion, then all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Council calendar, Ms. Richardson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is our last meeting of the month, and in addition to the regularly scheduled meetings, I wanted to point out that on the 29th of this month here at the Galleria between 3:30 and 6:30 p.m., there's going to be an open house on the EIS for the levee improvement program. And then not on the calendar, but on July 8th here at City Hall, we're going to be hosting the fraud awareness fair that this district attorney sponsors, so we should be having quite a bit of activity here on that day.
All right, great. And an EIS open house is right there consistent with our strategic plan vision to bring more festivals and fun to West Capitol Avenue.
You know, that's really important.
Yes, it is.
This is an important
It's
meeting.
very, I know.
Well, I'll put it as very informative.
And a big
especially
milestone.
for people that have some issues with flood control. It's very, very informative.
All right, and Mr. Flatley mentioned the James McKnight Memorial Ball, and he gave all the information, but I just also, in case anybody is still watching that was here for that earlier or didn't hear the presentation, it's on the front page of the city's website as well to get additional information about it and contact info for tickets that if anyone's interested. It's on the very front of the cityofwestsacramento.org. All right, City Manager report.
Nothing this evening, Mr. Mayor.
City Attorney report. Staff direction from members of the council. Mayor Pro Tem Villegas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple of things. I wanted to ask if staff can follow up with code enforcement on the property located on 6th and C, the former Harper House. I think after a couple windstorms, the fence is taking a beating and it's looking pretty shabby. And so I thought maybe the property owner would take care of it, but it's been going on now. It's been falling apart for a few months. So we can follow up with code enforcement on that. And then also, I noticed, and I know that the city manager's indicated that the property taxes are down, and so consequently, some of the facility districts that we have probably aren't as flush as they once were. I don't know if that is a direct correlation, but it appears that a lot of the tree maintenance, the shrubs and the pathways that we have put together in the last few years aren't getting the same level of care they were at one point. And I don't know if that's a direct correlation, but I just wondered if we can get an update on the status of it. Because I know at one point they were being pretty well maintained early on, and some that I frequent have fallen in disrepair. And I don't know what that's attributed to, whether it's just the lack of funds or what's going on with that. So I don't, unless you know or you want to share, or I can get a update in the staff report.
I don't know specifically, because I don't know which ones you're referring to, but generally the CFDs are adequately funded because they're
Is that right?
they're reliant on assessments. But we also have had some unique weather patterns this year, and some of our contractors haven't gotten out to deal with the late winds.
Okay, well then I'll share with you some of the ones that I've seen that look like they're struggling. All right, thanks.
All right, we have no future agenda item requests. Mr. Beers moves.
I'll second.
Mr. Christoph seconds. The meeting be adjourned. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.